At this point, I'd like to take a look at my page across a couple of the major browsers and see what the differences are and try to start adding some consistency. Now, I have very little styling, so one of the first things I know I'm going to see is deviations in the font family. So I actually already have the site up in Safari, which is Mac's default web browser, Internet Explorer 7, which is Windows' default web browser, and right here is Firefox, which is actually, I think, currently the most popular web browser. Or, I take that back. I'm sorry. I think Internet Explorer may be the most popular, but whichever. Honestly, if you cover these three browsers, it's not 100% of the people visiting your site are going to have these, but I would argue a good 90 to 95% of the people are going to. So if you cover these three browsers and try to make things consistent within them, you'll be good. You drive yourself nuts if you try to get it consistent for every browser imaginable. I mean, that's just not realistic. So as I mentioned, you see that each one has a slightly different font. If a font isn't explicitly defined, the font style or font family, for this, the browser is going to make its selection based on the preferences that it has set up. Now, I didn't mess with any of the preferences on any of these browsers. By default, we're going to see what they look like, and that's what they're set right now. So if you take a look at Firefox, and we look at my font, we'll see that the default font, if no font is defined, is Arial with a size of 16. Actually, 16 is important to note because all modern browsers by default size things to 16. So we could, with that said, Safari is going to have the same thing, although Safari is using Times New Roman or Times font size, which has a serif on it, so that means it has the little extra. If we look over here, look closely, it means that fonts with a serif have the little ornaments at the top and at the bottoms of them, where sans serif, meaning without a serif, don't have them. As you could see, this W in Firefox, it doesn't have anything at the end of it, just straight lines, whereas this one has one side is fatter and the other side's thinner, and it has little little ornaments at the end. And obviously the same thing for Internet Explorer. And if we go here, we'll see that by default, I'm in the options under General. I see that it's using web page font Times New Roman, which is a serif font. So I want to make the font type consistent throughout all these, right? So let me just zoom in so you could see this better. So what I'm going to do is go into Dreamweaver and pick what's known as a web-safe font. Now, a web-safe font means that no matter who it is, no matter what the operating system is, Mac, Windows, or Linux, they will have the font that you're calling for. Because when you're actually defining a font in your web page, you're not like embedding that file in your web page. You're actually asking the person's computer to look up that font set and find it and give it to you, and and render your page with that font. So since you're relying on the user to have it, you need to pick some of the most common fonts. There's two ways of doing this. I mean, if you're using Dreamweaver, I'm going to set the font family for my container div, which is going to have all my stuff anyway. And if I go into container, if I go into any CSS rule, under type, the very first option you have is font family, and you'll see all of these fonts listed over here. And you have a couple different, there's like 4 different styles of fonts. There's sans serif, sans meaning without a serif, without the ornament at the end. There's a serif, there's monospace, and then there's cursive. So I'm going to use a sans serif without an ornament. It's said that sans serif is easier to read online than serif, and it's the other way around for the printed page. When something's printed, they say it's easier to read serif than sans serif. The reason for this, they say, is that Now, mind you, these aren't, I don't want to say that these are the rules. It's just, I mean, they're just recommendations, and obviously with all artistic endeavors, it's how you break those rules or use them and play with them that really define you and your style. But basically, when you're looking at the web, you're having light come into your eyes, and that's how you're seeing it. So seeing all those ornaments over there is tiring on the eyes. I mean, inherently, the light coming into your eyes is going to tire you out. Now, on the printed page, you're actually seeing what's known as reflective light. The light from your environment is bouncing off that page into your eyes, having you see the page. And they say that the serifs on the printed page actually make it easier to read. Whatever. I'm not saying that's how it is, but that's what they say. And, you know, choose accordingly. So the font family by default is set over here. These are all web safe. I'm going to go with Arial. That's what I'll go. Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif. So what this is going right now, what this is asking for when it hits the user's computer is look for the font set called Arial. If Arial is not there, look for Helvetica. If Helvetica is not there, look for any kind of font that's a sans serif font. That should be it. I'll hit apply. Should be good. Let's see. So that transformed it. Now let me take a peek. I'll refresh Safari to sans serif. I'll refresh Firefox. It's not going to look too much different. Not at all, because that's its default anyway. So now we have consistency between the two. Here's Safari here. Here's Firefox. And now let's refresh Internet Explorer. Pretty good. So essentially, that's all we needed. Now, you know, all we needed to define the font family to get that consistent font look for the page. If you're not using Dreamweaver, you could always just look up web-safe fonts, and I looked up and I saw this article over here. It was actually the first or second hit on Google, and it just gives you a list and the look of them, so you could quickly kind of go through all of them and see what it is. And it also provides the code for you right here for these fonts. So there's plenty of options, and actually, more likely than not, Google's my default tool anyway for most of my any questions or when I forget code. So I'm always looking over here and just to see how other people are doing their font styling as well.